Folks, the human race is at a unique time in our history. Simultaneously, half of the civilized world remembers a world with no cell phones. Some to the point that a cell phone was just the stuff of science fiction, while the other half will never know what it's like to live life without one. They're connected to it. I mentioned the civilized world on purpose. Half of humanity also has no access to electricity. Think about that for just a moment. Globally, every other person does not have access to electricity, much less a cell phone, which is such a sad reality for a planet a mere 24,000 miles across. That's just 1/10 the distance to the closest object in space, which is the moon. So what's the deal? Why on earth would civilization allow such a disparity in the allotment of resources? There's only one main reason. It's really the reason from which all the world's troubles stem. It's greed, and more specifically, profit. Everything is profit driven. I mean literally everything. Schools test on the amount of knowledge students accumulate. Employees get promotions based on how they profit their employers. Most of us, we won't stay in a relationship that's completely one-sided. We gotta profit from these things or they quickly lose our interest. The law of abundance states that there is such an abundance of resources in the universe that there's plenty for everyone. Now, profit isn't all bad. As a matter of fact, profit really becomes dangerous when it benefits the few and excludes the many. The rich and powerful in America make up a very small part of the population percentage-wise, yet they're somehow able to maintain power by creating the rule book that the rest of us are expected to follow. We do as we're told, afraid to speak up for fear of being cast aside as conspiracy theorists and thus reducing our share of the overall profits. The sugar lobby and pharmaceutical companies have us walking around like zombies, too dumbed down and distracted to even notice what's really going on around us. We gotta come to the realization that these entities have a vested interest in allowing us to allow them to make our decisions for us. They profit from our ignorance. We trust these companies with a blind sort of faith, the kind that many of us wouldn't even afford our family in many cases. How many of you would cut ties with a family member or friend who was caught lying at your expense? Probably most of you, I'd say. Well, you do it in your relationships with big corporations every day by supporting them. At one time, Big Tobacco even paid doctors to be in their commercials promoting their product. How ludicrous does something like that sound today? Yet it's taken decades to take the steps necessary to finally warn the public about the obvious dangers of smoking, with the tobacco lobby fighting disclosure at every single opportunity. Now, the cure for this current disease of the mind is a systematic one. In order to create a cure, instead of just a treatment, we got to strive towards a new framework of thinking. One of objectivity and based on critical thinking skills. It seems so simple. The answer can't be right in front of our faces, or can it? And if so, how could we not see it all along? Well, the fact is, all truths are hidden in plain sight. Newton didn't invent gravity, just as Albert Einstein didn't invent relativity. Glass wasn't invented. These things were discovered by men who saw things differently than everyone else. Now, maybe it was their intellect that led them to enlightenment, or possibly something greater, like their destiny. Either way, a valuable lesson can be learned from the knowledge that everything that ever was is nothing more than another new discovery of the universe. And that these discoveries are just hidden in plain sight. The message is clear. Knowledge is the tool. The more you possess, the more likely you are to put yourself in a position to discover something new. Whether that be about yourself or the world around you. Luckily, the half of the world with access to electricity, and I'm sure everyone listening to this or hearing it, you hold all the world's knowledge in your pocket in the form of a cell phone with internet access. Now, unfortunately, knowing that the information is available and in your pocket just isn't enough. And in fact, that framework of thinking is incredibly dangerous. The fact is, where we get our information is just as important as what information we're receiving. The curse of the world is greed, and therefore we've always, in every instance, got to take a step back, analyze what the author of any new information has to gain from us believing it. It's become so much more difficult in 2015 to tell when we're being sold something. With new phenomena like targeted marketing in your Facebook and native advertising in the news, it's very easy to misinterpret fact from fiction. So, what now? How do we fix this growing problem? More importantly, how do we protect ourselves from being taken advantage of? We arm ourselves. That's how. But not with guns. No, instead we arm ourselves with information. Just as physics is the explanation of complex mathematical equations, the answers that we seek are not simple answers. We all experience things differently. Some of us a little differently and some a lot differently. No two people are alike, no two cultures are alike. We all share common ground though, and it's in this common ground that many of the answers lie. The key is looking at the problem differently by making the choice not to focus on what we don't yet know and realizing that we know enough to get the ball rolling. There is a starting point that we can all agree on. A simple exercise of the mind that can help anyone of any age, gender, race, political affiliation, whatever you want to separate us by, we can all agree on one thing. It's not a revelation, though it is brilliant. Now, before beginning this journey, we got to realize and be willing to accept that A to Z that's not one step. No, not even close. As a matter of fact, A to Z is actually many equal and important steps, each one building upon the last. The first step, though, is awareness. Now, awareness is step one, more specifically, building upon awareness of oneself in order to foster an awareness of one's surroundings. Self-awareness is defined by Wikipedia as the capacity for introspection and the ability to recognize oneself as an individual and separate from the environment and other individuals. Now, what does that mean? And how can you apply that, and how's that the secret? Well, let's break it down into parts and see if that helps us absorb it any better. Now, self is narrowly defined as the subject of one's own experience. Now, this is important since just as no two people are the same, no two people's experiences are the same. Now, in other words, it is entirely possible for both parties in a discussion to be right at the same time, at least to some degree, based on their experience. Now, awareness, it's defined as the ability to perceive, to feel, or to be conscious of events, objects, thoughts, emotions, and sensory patterns. So self-awareness then is simply the ability to perceive patterns or triggers in our own experience and thus be better able to recognize more effective ways to respond to current and future situations. Now, this is made easier by the brain's natural ability to detect patterns. Another way to think of self-awareness is simply putting the idea of practical wisdom to work for you. Now, practical wisdom, the idea, it's originally a Greek word, phronesis, and it's long been considered a virtue. It was actually the subject of much of Aristotle's teachings. The importance of practical wisdom is that the person not only has the knowledge of what is good or bad for him or her in a theoretical sense, but also that person has the capacity to act on such knowledge as well. Now, practical wisdom is what allows us to not only see the role of emotions in our decision making, but it's also the mechanism that allows us the opportunity to display personal responsibility by the application of that wisdom gained through our experience as individuals. Now, there are many exercises, both physically and academically, that can aid in the accumulation of awareness. The social sciences, such as psychology and sociology, have broken down the patterns of human behavior to such a degree that almost any human action is explainable through supported evidence. By grasping a working knowledge of each of these disciplines, one is sure to increase his or her awareness. Now, it's certainly not the only way to increase awareness though, and the quickest and most effective way to increase one's awareness seems to be through the practice of mindfulness. Now, mindfulness is simply being aware, moment to moment, of one's subjective conscious experience from a first-person perspective. Think of the practice of mindfulness as an active and open attention to the present. Now, self-knowledge requires more than just intellectual self-examination, and practical wisdom allows us to apply what we examine through introspection, although not to the point of self-absorption or overthinking. Those can both be really bad news. Now, as thinking beings, to continue, As thinking beings, we decide what has meaning and what doesn't. The idea of the present is very important to this equation, this framework of thinking, this philosophy. It's been said that depression is living in the past and anxiety is living in the future. Now, it's been said that being at peace is when you're living in the present. And this is very true. Many times we cannot see beyond our own shame from past failures or bad experiences, and our experiences or our expectations of what's to come. We carry our experiences with us. They influence our future actions. In order to share our experience, we must first know our experience and understand our experience. And mindfulness is so important that it's at the center of many ancient religions, such as Buddhism, for example. The good news is that mindfulness is a skill, and just like all skills, it can be developed over time. The most popular way to practice mindfulness is through yoga and meditation. Both yoga and meditation are designed to align one's own heart and mind onto the same page or frequency. Now, the universal law of vibration, it states that everything in the universe vibrates. Now, the universe itself vibrates at a frequency of 432 hertz. Recent research has even suggested that the frequency of 528 hertz actually aids in the repair of human DNA. For more information on frequencies, search Google real quick for the ancient solfeggio frequencies. It's interesting stuff. It's out there for anyone to learn about. Now, the idea that one's own thoughts and body aligning are when truths begin to reveal themselves is a pretty awesome notion. Only then can we begin to realize that what we call reality is a really fragile concept, and that our place in the world is much, much smaller than we had envisioned. Much smaller even than tradition or ritual would lead us to believe. Now, we begin to notice that reality is whatever we choose to believe it is, and that we attract the things that we think about. Understanding our own needs, desires, wants, failings, and habits allow us to see situations as they really are. We are then able to use a little objectivity to make decisions based on what is best for us as individuals. Once we're able to grasp the concept that the entire universe is just nothing more than a sea of energy fields, only then can we begin to manipulate these fields for our individual benefit. Now, the notion of this is the basis of another law of the universe, the law of attraction, which was actually popularized by the movie you may have seen, The Secret. Yeah, the law of attraction has spawned terms like likes attract likes. It's simply the phenomena that positive or negative thoughts directly bring positive or negative outcomes. That what you seek is also seeking you. Many people, many celebrities, many successful people attribute a very large portion, if not all, of their success to this small, simple concept. Now, the decisions we make, they become even more convoluted once you consider another phenomena, social pressure. Now, it's also known as peer pressure, although I feel that conjures up like the wrong definition for many of us. The reason is that we not only get pressure from our peers, as a matter of fact, that's a small portion of it. We get pressure from our family, our spouse, our boss, the TV, even ourselves, as well as our peers. One must ask himself, whose life is he or she living? If the answer is anyone but himself or herself, then that is really where the root of the problem lies. Now, our decisions and the reasons for them become even more complex, if it's possible, when we learn the concept of blind spots. Now, we all have them in our personalities. Most of us don't realize it though. Now, a blind spot is just a habit or an action that you think you perform really well, while those around you know that's just not the case. Now, once a blind spot has been revealed to you, it becomes a weakness. Now, weaknesses can be addressed. We don't like to, but they can be addressed. But blind spots, they can't. They can't. It's been said that humans naturally have so many blind spots in their personality that true self-awareness is impossible. The reason for this is that we're biologically driven to maintain a particular self-image to the point where we purposely, whilst yet subconsciously, disregard our own failings. The less objective a person is in regards to himself, as well as regards to the world, the more blind spots are usually present. Now, sometimes this is even to the point of self-delusion or the basic failure to even recognize reality. Now, we all know someone like this actually. You know, that person whose life is just always a mess, even after they've had help after help after help. Yet he or she continues just blaming everyone else and everything else for their problems and their circumstances continually, instead of just being held accountable, which is really all they need to do. We must constantly be aware of our impulses, our thoughts, and our actions, for they are the lock. We hold the key through our ability to reflect and, in turn, through objectivity, better understand what our motivations are. It's been said that the most obvious realities are the ones that are the hardest to see and talk about. None of this is a revelation. As a matter of fact, very little of what I've covered is my original thoughts, just as my original discoveries. The sad reality is that there is no magic pill for success. It's only achieved by an accumulation of life's lessons. Some of those lessons are more difficult to accept than others, more difficult to see as lessons than others. Success should really just be redefined as being a better version of oneself every day. Humanity already has the tools to create a utopian society, one in which we all have what we need in abundance. Now, this type of society will never exist without a complete paradigm shift, a new chapter in humanity where we accept the role of cause and effect in our current situation. It's been coming for a long time. It's not that the powers that be have been wrong this whole time, not from the beginning. They only became wrong once they gained knowledge and began to know better without acting on that knowledge for the betterment of all of us. The fact remains, the more collectively we know about our predicament, the better our chances of changing our predicament. Maybe these ideas will change the world. Maybe they don't. Hopefully, we all kind of now realize that more we know about ourselves, the better we are. My name is Jason Crabtree. I'm co-founder of the AwareWolves, a very small group of individuals who are trying to raise awareness about awareness, the importance of awareness. To learn more, like us on Facebook, like us on social media. Visit awarewolves.com for little videos about parts of this that may have caught your interest. Not trying to sell you anything, just trying to be a positive influence in everyone's life and be the voice of the real people.